Mercedes has revealed the all-new CLA, the 2026 CLA here this week, and the exterior styling is pretty good looking in my opinion. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. It'll be available in both gas and electric versions, which is why we see one with the regular grille there and another with the illuminated star panel there instead. It's 1.3 inches longer, which makes it actually longer than the last gen C-Class, believe it or not, and it's also an inch wider than the old CLA, 1.1 inches taller, and on a 2.4 inch longer wheelbase. Somehow, though, Mercedes says that it actually has lost rear legroom and elbow room compared to the old car, which seems like it takes real skill to get less space out of a bigger vehicle. Anyway, headroom is slightly better at least, and the driver and the passenger get slightly more room, so I guess that's what they prioritize. So, maybe the research suggests nobody uses the back seat in these. I don't know. I guess that research might also suggest that people never use the CLA's trunk either, because they chose to lose space there too. It's down 1.9 cubic feet over the old car. If you get the electric one, though, you more than make up for that loss with a front trunk for the first time in a Mercedes in 90 years. And that holds 2.5 cubic feet of stuff. As you can see, that interior is sticking with the idea of a nearly buttonless interior that's all screen with a 10.25 inch gauge cluster and a 14 inch infotainment screen, both being standard. If your passenger can't be bothered to move their hands 6 inches to the left in this small little vehicle, there's another 14-inch passenger display that's available as well, which actually seems like hilariously ridiculous to me. Like, this tiny little car, the interior is the size of a phone booth, and you need to have two 14-inch screens. Like a passenger display, I can see if we're talking about, a giant Escalade or something where it's actually like the middle screen's kind of far away from the passenger. But, in this tiny little thing, this is just a bizarre choice in my opinion. And if all that wasn't enough display, there's also a 12.2 inch head-up display available as well, which is a really big head-up display. Another option is a Burmester stereo with 16 speakers now, and because of the screen overload, there's also no room for buttons and vents, so the vents go where buttons would normally be, and just about everything else, including climate control, must be controlled on the screen. I feel like this is not going to age well. We're already seeing, again, Volkswagen backtracking on, the screen for everything, and so many others, kind of saying, hey, we need to do more buttons, and yet this is like going all in on the screens. Anyway, there's also a standard panoramic sunroof with no shade because Mercedes claims the lamination and the infrared film will have enough of a cooling effect and a dimming effect, but most people that live in the desert and in sunnier places know better and know that usually these things end up with you being uncomfortable. And, that's just, again, I don't know why they don't offer the little shade there for it, but it's going to be a booming aftermarket business for whoever, builds shades for these things. Anyway, the bridge-like center console with storage underneath is a nice touch at least. And moving on to the mechanicals here, we'll start with the gas ones. So all this info I'm about to say is for Europe, but I'm assuming it'll be mostly the same here for the US, but we'll see. Anyway, gas buyers are offered two different tunes of a 1.5 liter turbocharged four-cylinder that runs the Miller cycle, and it's combined with a 48-volt mild hybrid system and an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic, but they're not revealing power levels for these gas ones yet. They'll be available with front or all-wheel drive. And then moving on to the electric ones, there's the 250 Plus with EQ technology and the 350 4MATIC with EQ technology. So that base one uses a single rear motor, so it's a rear-wheel drive CLA, which actually kind of sounds like the most interesting one here in my opinion. And that does 268 horsepower and 247 pound-feet of torque, and is hooked up to a 2-speed transmission, one gear for the city and one gear for the highway. It'll do a 6.6 seconds 0 to 60 time, and combined with an 85 kilowatt-hour nickel manganese cobalt battery and a 0.21 drag coefficient, which is very low, it'll do an impressive 492 miles of range on the easier European WLTP test cycle, meaning probably close to 450 miles here in the EPA testing, maybe a little under that, but it'll be well over 400 miles of range on this thing, which is really good. Plus, even though this is the cheapest Mercedes EV, it still has an 800-volt electrical architecture that also enables an impressive 325 kilowatt DC fast charge rate, which means you add 202 miles of range in just 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I feel like most people probably stop at least every 200 or so miles, and the fact that you're starting off with over 400 miles of range on a full charge before you start out on your road trip, this to me is approaching like non-issue levels of range, and especially with how fast you charge. Like road trips would be a non-issue in something like this with this much range and that fast of a charge rate. I mean, you stop for lunch, you got another 400 miles. And most people, are not going 400 miles between stops. That's at least a 6.5 hour drive. So, yeah, very, very impressive here. And the dual motor version is the hot rod of the group, unless AMG decides to do a version here for the gas or electric versions in the future. But this 350 4MATIC one does 349 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque, which basically puts it right in between the middle of the last generation's CLA 35 and CLA 45 AMG editions. So we're already at AMG power levels and AMG performance here, just with the regular 350 version. And that one also uses the 2-speed transmission in the rear there, and will do a 4.8 second 0 to 60 time. And thanks to its ability to go rear-wheel drive only unless that front axle is needed, it still does 479 miles of range on that, again, easier cycle. And these electric ones are heavy, though, for a small car, weighing 4,707 pounds for that top dual motor one, which I think Motor One actually pointed out is heavier than a base S-Class. Obviously, again, it's just because of the battery pack. But, and I will say for EVs, that's actually not insane. Like a Mach-E is like 5,300 pounds, I think, something like that. So, I mean, this isn't terrible, but just kind of a funny statistic there. And there's also going to be a new multi-link rear suspension that resembles the setups you get on larger Mercedes models. So that should help with handling as well a little bit. And also a smaller 58 kilowatt hour LFP battery will be coming by the end of the year as well, at least for Europe, for people who don't need quite as much range. And there's no pricing for these new CLAs yet, but Mercedes says they'll arrive in the US later this year. So they are coming here this year for the electric versions. They say the gas ones will come sometime after that. Again, these are 2026 models, so I'm assuming that we'll get all of them here sometime in the next 12 months, if not sooner. And also this platform will also underpin the next generation GLA and GLB. And those will likely have all the same powertrain options, I'm guessing, as well. Because again, CLA has always shared everything with GLA and GLB anyway. So, I would assume basically all this mechanical stuff will be the same for GLA and GLB, just with different, packaging on top. And I do hope that the packaging is improved for those SUVs at least, because man, I would like to see a few more buttons and a little less screen there. But I'm sure the screens aren't going anywhere, but hopefully we get a few buttons. We'll have to see. But I mean, this is still a really impressive car, even with the mixed bag of the interior. The powertrain and the engineering is top notch, and we will see what pricing is. We don't have that yet. But if they price this well, I mean, this is really some next generation EV stuff. Again, next gen range, next gen charging speeds. Really impressive stuff here in the baby Mercedes. So anyway, great job on that part, at least, Mercedes. Just get a new interior director and you're set.